One while we were off during the Olympic break. Former New York Times columnist Nick Kristof is out of the race for governor in Oregon. The Oregon Secretary of State ruled that Kristof was not a resident of Oregon for 3 years. That's required to run for governor. And last week, the Oregon Supreme Court said, yep, that's right. They said he has spent a lot of time in Oregon, and yes, he owns property here, and clearly he does love Oregon a lot. But loving a place doesn't mean that you're a resident. He voted in New York in 2020, which to the Supreme Court shows that he was still deeply invested in New York's future at that time. Which got a lot of us wondering, what actually makes someone an Oregonian? If you live in Oregon, do you consider yourself an Oregonian? And when did you reach that point? I would consider myself an Oregonian. I've lived here for 32 years, worked here, raised my family here. I've climbed Mount Hood, hung out in Lincoln City with my wife, and paid my fair share of taxes. I almost said more than my fair. A lot of other people will say, of course I'm an Oregonian. I was born and raised here. My family goes back 5 generations. But let's be careful about how far we go back, because if you really go back to the founding of the state, we'd all be in a little bit of trouble. Here's a map created by a historian at the University of Georgia. We zoomed in on Oregon. The blue are the areas where the land belonged to the indigenous tribes. This is in the year 1850. All that's now Oregon belonged to the indigenous people back then. And then the white settlers came in, and you can see the change start on the map. It only takes about 35 years for most of the land to belong to white people, and the tribes were pushed into the reservations. Those are the red areas on the map. So there's that. Now, a lot of you who are relatively new to our state feel just as much of an Oregonian as I do, and we say welcome to you. Oregon's population grew more than 10% over the last decade, which is one reason we're getting another congressional seat, and that is great. In some regards, you're considered an Oregonian right away when you move here. You have 30 days after moving here to get an Oregon driver's license and register your car. And when you do that, you're automatically registered to vote. So there are legal things there. But what about the more nebulous ones, sentimental aspects of being an Oregonian? A big part of Kristof's argument listed those classic Oregon things. He ate at Moe's, he hiked part of the Pacific Crest Trail, he sent his kids to OMSI camp. Which brings us to our fundamental question: how many Oregon things do you have to do until you're considered a true Oregonian? Is there a list out there? We'd like to know. Tell us what you think makes someone a real Oregonian. How long does it take? What do you have to do? Our email is thestory@kgw.com, or leave us a voicemail, 503-226-5090. And keep sending your questions and comments. We're seeing them come in right now. Send them to thestory@kgw.com. Remember, this is definitely a two-way conversation. Up next, what you're saying back to us.